This is the Real Digital Transformation podcast series, empowering technology and business professionals to succeed with digital transformation. Now, here's your host, best-selling author Thomas Earl.
Hi, this is Thomas Earl, and welcome to another episode of the Real Digital Transformation podcast series. Today I have with me Raghuram Srinivas, the head of product at MetricStream. And our discussion today will be focused on governance, compliance, and risk, and how all that relates to artificial intelligence. Raghu, welcome.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for having me here. I must tell you, I've watched your episodes in the past and I found them to be very informative. I look forward to our session here today.
Yeah, so do I. I think that this is an area of extreme importance for many organizations because they are struggling with how to bring AI into their environments. What risks and challenges does that introduce? But also, what are the potential ways that we can leverage this to improve risk mitigation and governance control beyond just the AI environment and the enterprise overall? So I think there are two interesting layers to this that we can explore. But let's begin with just the organization wanting to bring AI internally into their environment, into their greater IT ecosystem. What challenges does that usually introduce from a GRC perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Thomas, that's a very a pressing topic and an important question, right? Now, as I get into to defining exactly what might be some of these considerations, if we would just take a step back and level set on what GRC essentially is all about, and that would, I'd guess, provide some more perspective on how AI then becomes very influential one in ensuring that the right controls are in place to prevent any sort of mishaps via AI. And also on the flip side, which is to see how AI can, in fact, boost operational efficiencies and make the whole GRC process themselves comprehensive. So, with that said, let me just take a quick a detour into defining what GRC is and then come back to your specific question if that's all right.
That's actually a good idea. We should establish what this whole field of practice is all about right now. If you could give us your definition of GRC and your description of how that exists right now as a field of practice within contemporary IT, I think that'd be a really good starting point.
All right. Now, GRC stands for governance, risk, and compliance. Now, this is a very niche domain. And believe it or not, you may not have heard of this term, but every organization practically has some element of GRC that they are implementing or they are following. Now, it's usually easier to explain what GRC is in terms of examples. I would say any organization, big or small, or organization that is established for profit or not for profit, obviously is established for a reason. These organizations have tangible objectives, they have goals, and they also typically have a growth strategy in place. So, the idea in all this is to establish business operations that are aligned with these tangible objectives and the growth objectives these organizations have. Now, how then can an organization ensure that during the course of its day to day operations, things are working efficiently, things are working well, so as uh, uh, to ensure that these objectives and goals are in fact met? So, this is where this concept of governance comes in. Now, this is an area where organizations are able to ensure there are right processes in place, the right controls in place to ensure that their business units are operating efficiently, and also efficiently in the sense that they operate with minimal disruptions. Now, as these organizations and the business units are operating during their daily course of business, they also need to ensure that they are aware of the potential headwinds, aware of any risks that they need to tackle during the course of their operations. And beyond all this, right, coming back to the bare basics, organizations exist in a given geography, they exist in a given country, state, county, what have you. So these organizations also need to ensure that they comply with the rules and regulations of the land where they exist. Now, all of these put together comprises what is called as GRC, essentially the processes and the practices in place to ensure that the company is able to provide the right level of governance to achieve the objectives, the right level of perspective when it comes to being proactive about identifying risks and mitigating them, and also the right level of processes in place to ensure that they are complying to the regulatory requirements. Now, it is in this space that we also at MetricStream operate, and we have a software technology product that helps companies achieve all these objectives.
Super. And so now, with us having established the context of that, how has AI, now that it's become part of the IT mainstream, even the business mainstream, how has AI impacted all of that?
Yeah.
How has AI impacted how we govern, how we strive for compliance, and how we manage risk?
Yeah. So, Thomas, that's a very important question, right? In terms of in today's day and age and the context of everything AI, it's very important to also understand how AI impacts how organizations govern and ensure that they are, mitigating any sort of AI risks that may occur. But in your question, it's interesting where you said, how can IT and business personnel mitigate the impact of AI? But if I were to just take a step back, right, just outside the confines of an organization, but society in general, you can actually see the kind of impact AI is having on people and the potential of potential impacts that AI can actually have on society at large. I was just reading this article on NPR a couple of weeks back. Did you know that there are about 4 billion people that are going to be voting in elections this year alone? So that's about half of the world's population that are going to participate in voting across the globe. Now, imagine that, right? This is a far reaching activity that is going to be happening, and this activity is going to define how the global politics. Now, it is in this context, now we are also talking about a hyper democratized AI environment. Now, just in the last week, India and Mexico finished their elections. And in the course of these elections, just in the last a couple of weeks back, that is, OpenAI came out with um, a publication, or they came out with a news article. Now, they actually flagged usage of chat GPT, where apparently there was a political party that was being targeted by several bots. Now, these bots targeting political party and providing disinformation is not new, right? So this has been in the news for many years. But what is different this time is the kind of human-like messages that these bots can actually end up sending. Now, that's where OpenAI was able to identify this proactively, and it looks like they were able to also contain the mass effect of this. But this was after the event occurred and after some of the disruptions were already caused. Now, it is also interesting to note that it was during the same time the one of the political parties also claimed that they saw an uptick in the social media interactions. They saw that their messages was being uh, received widely by the population large. But whether that was because of these bots or whether it was genuinely people acknowledging and appreciating the opposition's message, we don't know. And we also don't know if there is a correlation to the outcomes of the election. But you can just imagine, right? The seeds of distrust, this sort of an activity can actually seed in people's minds. And now, when you think of it, and when you think that about half of the world's population is going to vote in different elections, you can only imagine what the potential of disruptions could be. Now, when I actually talk about this, then focus back down to your original question, right? Of what should organizations be doing? That also now, you can see contextually what this actually means. Organizations also have to take a very proactive set of measures to ensure that they mitigate any sort of impact that AI can cause, and they also need to ensure that they have the right governance structures in place to ensure proper use of AI, where they can actually draw the benefits of AI technology, at the same time be aware of any sorts of risks that this can cause. So I did want to provide that context of how AI can affect the society at large, so the kind of impact that it's having on nation states, and coming down to the level of an organization, the kind of responsibility that these organizations also now need to undertake to ensure that their business operations are not unduly disrupted because of a system like AI.
Mm. And so this impacts not just how we run our business, but also how our business relates to the greater business community, because there are governance responsibilities we have internally
Yeah.
with how we run things that can be impacted by AI, but then there are outside external regulations that may still be emerging that further may constrain how we use AI or how we operate our AI-based business, right?
Absolutely. And you're right. Now, a lot of the countries, now EU specifically, they have been leading the charge on this, where they actually came up with a set of regulations to govern the effective use of AI. Now, again, being in this domain of GRC, we look at AI and AI's influence on GRC in two ways. So we usually call this AI for GRC and GRC for AI. Now, AI for GRC essentially means how can we bring in these cutting edge, bleeding edge technologies like AI into GRC operations to make them more comprehensive, to make them more efficient, right? So that's one part of it. And GRC for AI essentially refers to providing that governance, risk, and controls layer on top of AI to ensure that the AI risks are properly mitigated. Now, there is obviously things that organizations can do on both these streams to make the most out of the benefits that they get out of AI, and also extend the traditional concepts of GRC into AI governance as well.
And so, having specialized in this field now, to accomplish exactly what you just described, what would you say are the top three or the top five challenges that organizations face or that they should be prepared for?
Yeah. So I'll get to the pressing topic, right, which is more in terms of GRC for AI. That is, how can AI models be governed? Now, for organizations, given the democratization of AI, organizations first have to ensure that the policies around AI usage is appropriately documented, and these policies are widely distributed within the organization, and the employees are are trained on these policies. Now, what this obviously avoids is employees inadvertently disclosing trade secrets of companies, inadvertently posting data, sensitive data about their projects, about their company onto several AI systems that are out there that they can interact with, that they can play with, or take them for test drive. So this is one key step organizations have must take, and we see that happening now in organizations. Right, a lot of AI policy documents are being created, and employees are made to go through this process of training and attestation, so that they know when they interact with an AI system at work, or these days with remote work, when they interact on their work laptops or desktops, with an AI system, they exactly know how to interact with it, what are the kind of questions and prompts that they can ask of the system, and what they should avoid. So that would be the first challenge that companies need to look for. The second thing I would say is companies also understand the confines under which AI could be used for their enterprises. Now, this is something that we see a lot, where given the democratization again of AI, it is very easy for a business and IT personnel within companies to interact with AI systems and form different tangible, useful applications and use cases where they could potentially use AI. Now, companies also need to ensure that these use cases are clearly vetted out. They have a process, an intake process of AI based applications and AI ideations and AI use cases, and take them through a process where they can actually quantify this against proper tangible business outcomes. So that becomes very important, right? Where you don't use AI for the sake of using AI, but you use AI because you see there is a tangible business value or an outcome from that application.
Have
So
a,
that,
I just want to interrupt you for a sec, Raghu. What
yeah.
you just described about using AI when it can be determined that it really does provide genuine business value, not just for the sake of using it or just for marketing purposes.
Yeah.
So that it's a separate issue, but I want to see if I can relate that to governance, because I know that some organizations struggle with that decision point. Should we use it? Should we use it peripherally? Should we use it superficially so we can promote that we're using it? Or are we too hastily, are we adopting it too hastily, in that it may require an investment that we may not recoup because it doesn't add true
Mhm.
business value? My question is, when you have an internal IT governance framework that has policies, regulations, processes formally defined that you follow, and you upgrade that framework to incorporate the utilization of AI, even if you initially felt it was justified from a business value perspective, um, can a uh, can a modern IT governance framework, or can modern governance processes help you further understand to what extent it is providing value? Can it help you measure the value of AI for your business? Can the use of governance practices specifically
Mhm.
provide metrics and insight into that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Now, so one thing I'd say at the outset, right? Investing in IT projects, and after the projects have been long deployed, identifying the lack of any tangible business value is not new for the domain as such, right? There have been several projects that have gone really well, and I'm sure all of us have had experiences where projects started with great business value in mind, but then by the time they got deployed, AI or not, may not have seen the kind of tangible business values, right? And have been stalled. So that being said, the potential of a lot of such projects getting into that zone of not realizing the value is obviously a bit more high in the AI domain. There's several reasons why that could happen, but we'll come to that maybe at a later time. Now, back to your question, right? What are those? What is the kind of regulatory framework and governance framework can one put in? Now, uh, there are several processes that are out there. In fact, there is one that I really recommend, and I would like to refer also, which is produced by OECD, which is the Organization of Economic Affairs and Corporate Development. Now, OECD.org produced an AI policy or a methodology for classification of AI systems. Now, it is very interesting when you look at the kind of factors that they proposed. Now they look at an AI system. Now, even before you engage on building out an AI system, during the initial phase of conception and conceiving the ideas of the AI application, OECD provides 5 different categories with which it recommends one should evaluate the AI based application. There is one around the impact on people and planet. There is one which is the economic context in which that AI application will eventually be deployed, the data and the input that is required for the AI system, and the model itself, right? So, which is the technological elements of the AI system. And then the last classification category is around, the kind of tasks that this AI system does and the output it produces. So if you look at it, right, so OECD recommends 5 categories, and what is interesting is the hardcore technology element of the AI model, what the algorithm is, so on and so forth, is actually one of the 5. You would think, right? When you talk about AI, there's a lot of focus on a cool Gen AI algorithm, but that's important. But it's only one of the 5 categories that is recommended. So, this sort of governance structure where you could actually first look at the AI use case or the application and go through the elaborate exercise of identifying the different factors. Now, one of the factors is, who's this AI system affecting? There could be use cases where the internal employees are the people that are interacting with an AI system, or there could be use cases where external consumers are interacting or affected by the outcomes of AI system. Now this goes back into the people uh, that are affected by the AI application in itself, right? Now obviously the tolerance level of AI risk or a mishap due to AI may be a bit higher if it's the internal employees. Maybe you can put in trainings in place to ensure that there are mitigation steps that they can look for. But obviously if the outcome of an AI system directly impacts an end consumer, a company's end consumer, the tolerance levels are obviously much lower, right? So there are a whole host of factors around this that one can evaluate an AI application against. Then there is also the economic context of why and when an AI application is developed. Now, AI, you'll see many a times we talk about AI and we also talk about displacement of jobs in AI, right? So that speaks directly to the efficiency gain that an organization can get because of AI. Now, this is where organizations methodically can try to map out, well, if an AI system is deployed, an application is deployed, and if it is deployed for this particular function, how much of a human labor can it effectively replace? And if it did replace, does it do a good job in doing so? So, this is where the economic impact and the people impact can be further evaluated by the organization using a whole slew of factors around this.
Raghu, in relation to what you were just describing, one area of concern that I see frequently in relation to understanding how well an AI system is performing based on expectations, based on risks, is when we give our internal AI systems the ability to carry out autonomous decision making. So,
Yeah.
decisions previously made by humans now being made independently by the AI systems, whether they're simple decisions or more important ones, with a enhanced governance process or enhanced governance tools, perhaps even AI powered governance tools. How well can that help us now assess an AI system's performance, specifically when carrying out decisions autonomously? So the results of those decisions, whether they're good or bad, the consequences of bad decisions, how much that may have damaged or cost an organization versus the benefits, the optimization benefits, the performance benefits of being able to have those decisions carried out in real time automatically. How can governance right now help us assess that?
Yep. So there are a few principles specifically on AI governance to help mitigate those problems, mitigate those concerns, right? Again, mitigation is the key word. Now, again, in the context of risk, obviously, we know we do our best to mitigate. Are we able to fully eliminate? Maybe not. But then that is the choice organizations have to make. Now, what is the level of mitigation that's acceptable? And what is that level that can get through that is okay, right? With minimal reputational risk, with minimal financial risk, so on and so forth. Now, a few things to keep in mind when it comes to these autonomous AI agents, right? Autonomous, again, is where the AI system takes on a particular application and the outcomes of the AI are directly sent to action, and there is no human in the loop moderating what AI is recommending. Now, in these cases, obviously, during the build phase of AI itself, organizations can take care of a few things, right? So, one is in terms of the explainability provided by the model. So, one of the things organizations can do is to see how easy is it to discern why the AI model during its training phase took some decisions. Are you able to trace back and are you able to map this back to what a human would have done when posed with the same sort of input or the same set of questions? So this becomes key, which is our ability to explain the AI output. That's one aspect. Now, the second aspect organizations should keep in mind also is the kind of data that the AI model is trained against. Now, this is again an interesting element to this, right? So, I'll just give you an example of a fraud model that I'd worked on. Coincidentally, this model, we were involved in building this for this organization during peak COVID times. So, when we started the project, when we conceived of the project, it was pre-COVID. But then by the time the model got deployed, we were bang right in the center of COVID escalations around the globe. So what had happened was we had built a fraud engine that is looking at financial transactions and flagging if a particular transaction is fraud or not. Now, if you think about this, right, how the world operated before COVID, you would see for most common individuals, most of their transactions would be transactions that would be physically where they are physically present. Yes, there were still online transactions, but for things such as ordering food and for certain types of items that the categories of items they would buy, it was mostly in person. But things changed during COVID, right? Every transaction for the most part became online in nature. Now think about what this model did. When the model was trained, it was trained with a certain pattern, and the pattern was, hey, most of the transactions of a certain category were in person, point of sale system based transactions. But then when the model was running in deployment, most of the transactions it's seeing are all online transactions. So it started flagging these transactions as fraudulent transactions. So where we wanted to deploy the model to to reduce the kind of fraud detection work that humans had to do, it actually had a negative impact for a brief period. So this goes back to another aspect of data, right, which is to be able to measure the drift in data. That is where organizations, when they deploy the AI models, also need to ensure that there is a constant monitoring on the kind of data parameters and the data input that goes into the model, and constantly measure how different or how much of a drift there is from the time it was trained versus the time when it is constantly running in deployment and production. And another thing I would also add to this is this whole concept of OPM, which stands for ongoing performance monitoring. Now, this is where, if you did have an autonomous system every once in a while, and the frequency again should be defined by the business, should be defined by what would be a comfortable time period where the model should also the output that's coming from the model is also evaluated by certain human evaluators. Now, the model may have taken an autonomous decision, but an audit at a constant time period and at constant frequencies to see if the same question was posed to a human, would the human come up with the same answer, or would the human have adjudicated a different way? So this is that element of ongoing performance monitoring, which is a continuous audit mechanism which kicks in every few weeks, also can be instituted to prevent the ill effects of these models. Now, having said all this, right, to what degree do you tune these controls, you tune these measures, also depends on the kind of recourse the person impacted from the model has. Is what I mean by that is, let's say, I am the consumer of the model. Now, in this case of the fraud detection model that I was talking about, if let's say I am the end customer who owns a credit card and my transactions are being flagged as fraud. Now, if I had a model that was making these decisions and marking my transactions as fraud as a consumer, do I have a recourse? In the sense, can I overturn the model's adjudication? Because as a human, I know better, I know my transactions better. So that also plays an important role, to the extent where the people that are affected by the outcomes of the model have that ability to overturn the model's adjudication. The degree to which that is possible can also affect the kind of controls that can be in place, right? Can you have more relaxed controls, or should the controls be much tighter, because the impacted consumer may not have recourse, they just have to live with the decision the model takes. So these would be some things that organizations can put in place, especially in terms of autonomous models.
Super. That's very interesting. It's a discussion we could have for a long time, I think. There are a lot of
Yeah.
aspects and details to that. And then, of course, all relating to the degree of responsibility we give an autonomous decision-making process. So, Raghu, just to conclude our discussion today, if you had to list the top 3 best practices or your top advice to organizations, just briefly, each one, 2, 3, just the 3 main things to look out for when merging AI with GRC within your organization, whether it's to govern AI or to use AI to help govern other aspects of your digital enterprise. What are the top 3 pieces of advice you have?
Yeah. So the first, obviously, would be a robust classification of the AI application in itself, right? The model obviously powers an application. Now, the first advice I would have for organizations is to double click on this particular application and do a thorough classification, right? See what kind of inherent risks this particular application possesses. Now, this is where some of the things we just discussed, which is around who's the person, who are the people that are affected by the model. Do the people that are affected by the model have a recourse against the model's decision making, or what is the impact of a reputational risk or a financial risk? So this sort of analysis of the inherent risks of the model, I would say, would be step 1. And by the way, the EU AI Act also places enormous emphasis on this, right? Which is to rank model based on their criticality. So that would be step 1. Step 2, I would say, would be, or recommendation 2, would be to look at those specific inherent risks and come up with appropriate control measures. Now, organizations can say, well, there are all these risks, so why even bother with AI? We can continue things the way we are doing without AI. That may work, but then when you look at the competition around you, you see organizations are embarking on their AI journeys. So, it's an imperative for organizations also to see how best they can use these technologies. So, standing on the wayside is not an option mostly. So this is where what can you do with appropriate controls in place. So going back to step one of identifying the inherent risks, are there ways in which we could put the proper control structures to ensure that the risks posed by AI is mitigated? I mean, the examples that we just talked about, right? The constant measurement of data drift. That's one prime example of a control. The ongoing performance monitoring, where the human is forced into the loop of an autonomous decision making every so often, is an example of another control. So things of this nature should be put in place to ensure that the risks that are posed by the AI don't go out of control. And the third, I would say, is be very conscious on where one is deploying AI applications. So this goes back to performing the business value due diligence. There is no benefit one gets besides, of course, some marketing tidbits on implementing AI for the sake of it. Now, I would say that pain of evaluating the inherent risks of putting controls in place, they're all worth it only if there's tangible business value, and companies need to ensure that they hone in on this specific aspect and not get into the AI journey for the sake of it. If there's no business value, maybe you are better off waiting to see when the best business case emerges out of a technology like this.
Super. Thank you so much for your time. Before we finish, Raghu, could you please tell us a bit more about your role at MetricStream and what MetricStream itself is innovating right now?
Absolutely. Now, I'm the head of products at MetricStream. We are an industry leader in the GRC technology space. Now, in my role, I'm responsible for the product roadmap and the product strategy, and also to ensure that we have the best in class features, and we are constantly innovating to ensure that we are leading the pack in terms of product capabilities and innovations. Now, that being said, MetricStream, we are very proud of the leadership position that we have garnered in the GRC technology space. So, be it analysts like Forrester or Risk Tech or Chartis, all of these analysts have ranked us as leaders in the space. Um, we have a suite of products for organizations to manage the aspects of GRC that I just described earlier on this podcast, right? So, which is around governance, risk, and compliance, providing the right set of tools for the first, second, and third line of defenses within organizations to ensure they have their GRC operations under control. Now, in the last year, we've also taken tremendous strides in our investments in AI. So, again, like I said, we look at AI in two modes: AI for GRC, which is bringing AI into the GRC operations. In this context, we launched a product called Aspire. Aspire is our industry's first knowledge centric decision making tool that's powered by AI. Now, this is where Aspire is able to look at any organization's GRC practices and identify those areas that need improvements. Improvements could be places where companies are performing unnecessary, redundant control assessments or control tests or risk assessments, and look at other areas where companies are likely missing certain threat signals and they're not focusing their risk analysis and mitigation efforts on certain areas. So this is where Aspire comes in, where it's looking at a whole bunch of data parameters, a whole bunch of signals, and helping organizations take the right decisions so far as GRC goes. So this is the innovation that we've done on the AI space, which is AI for GRC. And of course, being in the GRC space, we also take AI governance and AI risk very seriously. This is where we've enabled capabilities where organizations can perform the different types of inherent risk assessments, setting up of controls for mitigating AI risk, so on and so forth. Organizations have an ability to configure and monitor all of those parameters within our product as well.
Wonderful. Sounds really interesting. And it sounds like a field that will just continue to grow and become of central importance to organizations around the world. So I think that there's nothing but more growth and innovation ahead in that field. So it'll be exciting to see how that develops and evolves.
Absolutely, absolutely, Thomas. And thank you for also being on this journey of creating such useful podcasts and informative podcasts for educating all of us, right, and providing these or bringing the various perspectives across different industries and different companies. This really helps in all of us also feeling like being a part of a larger community and learning from each other.
Thanks, Raghu. I appreciate that. And I think, as we move ahead and all of the talk about the threats and abuse of AI, how it can impact not just business, but society, the whole field of governance and compliance and risk mitigation, it'll just be important to our global community as a whole to ensure that we do this right. So your contribution to that also, I think, is very important. Raghu, thank you so much, and hopefully we can have another discussion very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Thomas. Look forward to it.
Thank you for listening. Follow Thomas on LinkedIn